Hi, welcome back to 1001 Nights of Reading the World. I'm Mike, and today I'll be attempting to discuss the Book of Dede Korkut, a Turkish epic with no less than 3 translators and editors here. And this, I want to say right away, could be counted for many countries in Central Asia on both sides of the Black Sea, ranging from Kyrgyzstan to Turkey. I'm counting it for Turkmenistan, which is kind of right in the middle. The Oghuz Turks is the ethnic group that this epic kind of pertains to, and it's historic, and so being a nomadic and semi-nomadic tribe, they've kind of crossed this entire Black Sea region. I'm just counting it for Turkmenistan that so I can color off another country on the map, and I'm trying to read books from as many countries as possible in this 1001 Nights of Reading the World. So I am counting it for Turkmenistan, and we'll move on. So this is, as I said, a historic epic, although it's debatable whether there's no evidence for any of really the events in this story actually happening. And it does big comparisons to the Iliad, due to it being a document sort of warfare of the battles that this Oghuz tribe had with their Christian neighbors. So they're referred to as infidels in the book. That's the word that is used, and they are Christians. Geographically, we get Christians in the Byzantine Trebizond, and we get Christians in a place in Georgia at one point. So just to give some context of where this is taking place and who they are fighting, there's plenty of footnotes, at least in this edition. It's an older edition, but I do also believe there is a newer edition in Penguin. Don't quote me on that. You'll have to look it up. But this is a really important epic, obviously, and I'm kind of surprised that I'd never heard about it before doing research for this project. And it's truly important for this whole region, kind of on the scale of the Epic of Manas, which I still have to experience for one of the countries in this region in this project, and definitely is coming. So I'm trying to use this Reading the World project to experience as many of the great classics around the world as possible as well. So while it begs comparison to the Iliad, Dede Korkut, the titular character, it would be almost as if in the Iliad, Homer was actually a character within the story and showed up and sang songs and told tales and at random parts in the book, but didn't actually participate in any of the battles or main events of the plot. So Dede Korkut is kind of the tale teller and a character within the book, which is really interesting, or within the story, which is kind of interesting. And also, where I feel it deviates from the Iliad comparison is that there are strong female characters in the book. And when I say strong, I mean like prominent female characters in the book that have long sets of dialogue and things like that, and then also physically strong. There's actually one part of the book where we have a female warrior that displays martial ability. So I found that to be kind of interesting for the historical context that this is in, I guess. But what I really thought of, more so than the Iliad, and another comparison in the introduction here was Beowulf, what I really thought of was King Arthur in the Round Table, Knights of the Round Table, because we have sort of a Khan, the Khan of Khans. I'm going to quote here from the introduction. In the epic, the king of the Oghuz, aggrandized with the epithet Khan of Khans, is Bayendir Khan, and between him and the beys who attend his council, or divan, there exists a comitatus relationship. Bayendir Khan is the final authority for all group action, the supreme judge in all decisions that will affect the Oghuz nation. And let me skip forward. Despite his political preeminence, Bayindir Khan is not a man of action and hence not the chief protagonist of the epic. Just as Higelac is outshone by Beowulf and Charlemagne by Roland, so Bayindir Khan seems pale beside his son-in-law and Beylerbey, Salur Kazan. Salur Kazan, as it goes on to say, is the military leader of the Oghuz, and so perhaps these comparisons are more apt, the Roland and Charlemagne and so on, but I was thinking kind of a Lancelot and King Arthur type of dynamic, but I guess King Arthur does have a pretty prominent role even in like the battles and the ending and so on. So perhaps these comparisons are more apt. But regardless, doesn't matter. We're not here to compare. We're here to experience. So we see a lot of adventures, kind of side adventures, and I did mention this leader. This leader that is kind of Salur Kazan. He features in 4 of the 11 legends that are in this book. So you can think of them as chapters, but basically there are 11 legends. And Salur Kazan is the lead character, or a lead character in 4 of them, but that leaves us 7 others where we get different characters going off on different adventures. Some of them only appear in one legend and never again. And we get really fascinating stories in here. A lot of focus on mother, father, and son relationships. And we get stories where sometimes magical events will crop up. A note on the historic, I think I already kind of alluded to this, but from the introduction again, which is very useful in understanding the story. So much of the book of Dede Korkut has a ring of authenticity that some readers conclude the entire work is historical. Skip forward. Yet nowhere in the book is there any indication that the Oghuz participated in even one of the major historical events of their time. So, you know, while we get all these battles and things from the perspective of the Oghuz Turks and this history, but, you know, the author of the introduction does go on to acknowledge that this is an excellent cultural history of the Oghuz Turks. So it's not like just because they're not historical events, we can't learn something from them. But, you know, if you enjoy reading, I don't need to preach to you about the importance of that, of myths and legends and fiction in understanding a culture both historical and present. So it's a worthwhile read, and I'll try not to get too spoily with stuff, but you know, there is a lot of repetition in the stories, in the kinds of things that happen. So if I'm picking out some trends, we get the mother, father, son relationships, which are sometimes troubled, sometimes, you know, in a lot of the stories, we get a character that goes out and fights, or is going out hunting, or going on a mission, and they end up getting captured by one of the enemy Christians, and then they either have to try to find a way to escape, or another character has to come to their rescue with a battle. Or sometimes we get sort of courtship. There's one story that pops out in my mind right now where a character has to overcome 3 trials of defeating these powerful animals to win marriage to a princess of a powerful leader. And this powerful leader, he decapitates and hangs their heads from the castle walls of anyone who tries these trials and fails. And so this hero, of course, you know, fights the bull, the lion, and a big old camel is the final boss in this situation, and wins the princess's hand in marriage. So that's kind of an example of the fantastic nature that can kind of come out, but most of the stories are pretty realist, if I remember. The sort of magical or fantastic stuff kind of comes out only in a few of the stories. And as I mentioned, there is one story where sort of two I don't know if I want to call them lovers or yeah, like a man and a woman who love each other, and are engaged to be married, basically battle and take down a whole group of warriors and things like that. So there's a lot of real interesting stuff in here, but you'll have to have some patience because there is some repetition of things that happen in the stories, and even sort of the language itself. And like Dede Korkut showing up has sort of his refrain that at the end of a number of stories, he'll repeat sort of the same few lines. All the stories kind of open and begin with sort of a praising of Allah, of God. So there's these certain repetitive things that are in it, and I believe these stories were meant to be sung rather than told. So another sort of repetitive thing is a lot of just like I don't know. I think somebody gets their head cut off in at least every page or every other page. So. And then also, now that I'm thinking of all this stuff, one thing I found, I guess, interesting, and is sort of I guess, tells about the world in which this legend is taking place, is that the ability to kill, to be a warrior, is highly valued. It is as highly valued a skill as just about, as horseback riding, as hunting, as doing anything. We get the impression here of a world that's tough, of a world that as a man, particularly, as a man, you are expected to grow up and be able to take someone's head. It's like that is part of life. And it's pretty hard for me to get into that mindset, but also it's kind of like you have to recognize that these certain lifestyles, are they necessarily innate in the human condition? Not necessarily. I mean, some societies are more peaceful than others, but I think some societies kind of have to adapt and have this necessity for violence just by the harsh conditions. For example, I believe we're looking in the region we're looking at a lot of steppes, right? We're not looking at like great farmland here. It's a hunter and herding society, from what I can tell. Please correct me if I'm wrong. This is just my way of trying to understand this sort of focus on violence. But we also get that in the Greek societies. Being a warrior is sort of it's looked at as a great thing to be a warrior. In the Iliad and the Odyssey as well. Like it's being able to kill isn't just it's something, it's a virtue. Or is it a virtue, or it's a skill? It's a skill, and it's a necessary part of life. So it's grappling with that, I guess, historic context in this book is something that I was doing, and yeah, it just makes you think because there are so many references. There's also a part in this book that is definitely it's hard not to think of the Odyssey. There's a large character, and this is another magical it's interesting that as I'm talking here, the stories with the fantastic elements are the ones that stick out most in my mind. So there's one where there's a large man, I guess, or creature with one eye that somebody in this tribe raises, but then he becomes so violent that they have to ostracize him. And there's a part where the hero of the story actually impales this eye with a burning rod. So it's like, was this influenced by the Odyssey? I'm not sure, because that sounds a lot like a part of the Odyssey, doesn't it? So there's a lot of interesting surprises in here. I haven't revealed them all, I hope, but those are the ones that have definitely stood out in my mind after reading it. And It's one that, of course, my understanding of all the complexities and all the intricacies is very limited, so I'm probably better to stop here after just kind of doing a little overview of what's going on. And I will say, I do sometimes get, like, obviously I did a few videos back, a video where I was saying how tired I was of the repetition of a lot of modern literature. Well, old literature can get very repetitive too. It's like, you know, how many more executions and things do I need to read about? You know, that seems to be a strong theme lately in the books, but I don't know. I guess it's just it's the history of humanity we carry in our literature, as well as a whole number of other things that from our modern day perspective we look at and say are terrible. But it makes me wonder, like, in the past, was it just life, or have we as people always been creating these myths and legends that are much more like violent and put a lot more emphasis on the violence and sensational things? And, you know, like, legends aren't historical documents, and I imagine that legends and myths and stories, whether they're being told out loud or written down, are always meant to, like, entertain and surprise whoever's listening or reading. So details do inevitably get exaggerated, and I don't necessarily need to read this and think, oh, it was a really violent society, but maybe it's just a reflection of the violent times of warfare that happens to every society. And then that gets turned into sort of a legend that, you know, we as people love to hear these bloody and interesting and sensationalist tales, I guess, throughout history. It keeps us entertained over a campfire or sitting inside our suburban homes or wherever we happen to be in whatever time and place we happen to be. So that is my my experience with the book of Dede Korkut. I'll move on. There's, I believe there's at least one other video on YouTube that goes into a little bit more detail of things than I have here. So, you know, just do a quick search and you'll find it. They don't need my help to shout them out or anything. So we'll see you later, and have a great day. I also just realized that I forgot to add the video of me coloring off Syria in my last video, so I'll do that right now.